The great hall of the Galactic Senate stretched out like a massive dome under the artificial stars that lit the chamber from above. Jake Morrison stood at the center podium wearing his crisp blue uniform, with silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. The human admiral kept his face calm, even though hundreds of alien eyes stared down at him from the curved seats that rose up all around the chamber, like an ancient amphitheater. Lisa Rodriguez stood behind him, holding a datapad that showed messages. Coming in from Earth every few minutes, her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her brown eyes scanned the crowd of aliens who filled the chamber. The sounds they made were strange clicks and hisses and deep rumbling noises that the translation devices turned into words humans could understand. Senator Vextar rose from his seat in the front row. His green scaly skin caught the light as he moved, and his yellow eyes fixed on Jake with obvious hatred. The Altarian leader had been trying to reduce human influence in the galaxy for years, and today, he thought he finally had his chance. Fellow senators and honored delegates, Vextar began his voice, carrying clearly through the chamber. We have gathered here today because the humans have once again shown they cannot be trusted to follow our laws. His forked tongue flicked out as he spoke, and several other aliens nodded their agreement. The Zenthari ambassador Krenal clicked her insect-like mandibles together in a rhythm. That meant she was pleased. Her bug-like head turned toward Jake, and her compound eyes reflected the chamber lights like tiny mirrors. Our sources tell us that the humans have built weapons that go far beyond what the treaties allow, she said. In her buzzing voice, Jake felt Lisa shift behind him, and he knew she was getting more reports about which alien governments were supporting the charges against humanity. The list was growing longer by the minute. Most of the major powers in the galaxy seemed to be lined up against them. High Chancellor Durack stood up from the central throne that marked his position as leader of the Senate. The massive Gorlan was over 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone, and arms thick, enough to crush a human without effort. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. Admiral Morrison, Durack said, you stand accused of violating the Galactic Arms Control Treaty, signed by your government 20 years ago. The evidence suggests that humanity has constructed military vessels that exceed the limits we all agreed upon. Do you understand these charges? Jake stepped forward to the speaking platform. His boots echoed in the sudden silence that filled the chamber. Every alien in the room was watching him, and he could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing pressing down on him. I understand the charges, Your Honor, Jake replied, keeping his voice steady and clear. But I believe there has been some misunderstanding about what humanity has been doing. Senator Vexatar hissed loudly, and several other aliens made sounds of disbelief. The Balani delegate, who looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard, ruffled his feathers in agitation, while the Keth representative showed his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. Misunderstanding, Vextar repeated with scorn. Our intelligence networks have been watching your activities for months. We know you have been building something, in secret. We know you have been moving resources and materials to hidden locations. We know you have been testing new technologies that should not exist. Lisa leaned forward and whispered something in Jake's ear. He nodded slightly, then looked back. Up at the assembled aliens, the chamber was completely quiet now except for the soft humming of the environmental systems that kept the air breathable for all the different species. Senator Vexistar raises some interesting points, Jake said calmly, and I appreciate the concern that many of you have expressed about human military activities. But I want to assure this body that humanity has always honored our treaty obligations. The Gorlan Chancellor leaned forward in his throne, his massive hands gripping the armrests. Admiral Morrison, the evidence against your species is quite substantial. We have sensor readings showing unusual energy signatures from your outer system. We have detected the movement of construction materials on a scale that suggests major military shipbuilding. We have intercepted communications that reference classified projects. Jake nodded thoughtfully, as if he was considering this information for the first time. Several aliens shifted in their seats, and he could hear the soft sounds of their various forms of communication, whispers and clicks and electronic beeps as they sent messages to their home governments. Your Honor, Jake said, I believe the concerns of this body deserve a proper response. Humanity has indeed been working on several classified defense projects over the past decade, but I want to emphasize that everything we have done falls within the letter and spirit of our treaty agreements. Senator Vexitar stood up again, his tail lashing behind him in anger. You speak of the letter of the treaty, but what about its intent? The whole purpose of the Arms Control Agreement was to prevent any single species from gaining military superiority over the others. Yet here you are, building secret weapons that could threaten the balance of power we have maintained for centuries. Other aliens began to voice their agreement. The chamber filled with a cacophony of different sounds, as dozens of species expressed their displeasure. The Zenthari clicked rapidly while the Balani chirped in high-pitched tones. The Keth growled low in their throats, and the smaller species made whatever noises they used to show anger. High Chancellor Durak raised one massive hand, and the chamber fell silent again. His gray eyes fixed on Jake with an expression that was impossible to read. Admiral Morrison, he said in his booming voice, this Senate has reviewed the evidence against humanity and we find it compelling. Therefore, we are prepared to issue the following ultimatum. Jake felt his heart rate increase slightly, but his face remained calm. He had been expecting this moment for weeks and had spent countless hours preparing for what would come next. Humanity has 7 standard days to present all military vessels and installations for immediate inspection by a joint Senate committee. Durak continued, if you refuse or if our inspectors find evidence of treaty violations, humanity will face immediate sanctions, including possible expulsion from the Galactic Alliance. The chamber erupted in noise again as aliens discussed this development among themselves. Jake could see that most of them were pleased with the ultimatum. They expected humanity to back down or to be caught. In their violations either way, the human influence in galactic politics would be greatly reduced. Jake waited for the noise to die down, then stepped forward to the speaking platform again. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the chamber, and there was something in his tone that made several aliens look at him more carefully. Respected members of the Senate, he said, humanity accepts your terms. We will comply fully with your inspection requirements. He paused, and a slight smile appeared on his face. In fact, I think it's time we showed you exactly what we have been working on all these years. The elevator descended through solid rock for what felt like hours before finally stopping with a soft chime. Jake Morrison stepped out into a corridor carved from the living stone of the Colorado mountains. The walls were smooth and lined with lights that cast everything in a pale blue glow. Lisa Rodriguez walked beside him, still carrying her datapad, which now showed updates from the Senate session that had ended just 6 hours ago. Patricia Hayes was waiting for them in the main briefing room. The general was a small woman with gray hair and sharp green eyes that had seen too many battles. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her posture was ramrod straight, even though she had to be exhausted from the emergency planning sessions that had been going on since Jake returned from the Senate. Admiral, she said with a nod. Dr. Clark is already here with the latest reports from Project Leviathan. Nathan Clark looked up from a holographic display that showed technical readouts and construction data. The scientist was younger than the military officers around him, but his brown hair was already showing streaks of gray from the stress of the past 10 years. His glasses reflected the blue light from the hologram as he adjusted the display. Jake, he said, using the Admiral's first name as he always did when they were in private. The Harbinger is ready. The final systems tests were completed yesterday, and Captain Murphy reports that all crew training is finished. We can begin the demonstration whenever you give the order. The holographic display shifted to show a view from space where Jupiter hung like a giant orange marble in the blackness. Behind the planet's largest moon, construction lights twinkled like tiny stars as work crews made the final preparations. The hidden shipyard had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for a decade. Jake studied the image carefully, noting the sleek lines of the vessel that was docked at the construction platform. The ship was huge, bigger than anything else humans had ever built, but its design was unlike the bulky warships that other species favored. Instead, it looked almost organic, as if it had grown rather than been constructed. How are the crew holding up? Jake asked. This has to be hard on them knowing they've been stuck out there while the rest of the fleet gets all the attention. Patricia pulled up another display showing personnel reports. Captain Murphy has done an excellent job keeping morale high. The crew knows how important their mission is and they're eager to finally show what they can do. Ryan picked good people for this assignment and they've been training together for 3 years now. Lisa looked up from her data pad where she had been reading messages from Earth. Admiral, the President wants a full briefing before we proceed. She's concerned about the political implications of revealing the Harbinger now, rather than waiting for a better time. Nathan pushed his glasses up his nose and frowned. Jake, we need to talk about what happens after we show them the ship. The psychological impact alone is going to be enormous. Most of these alien species have been building warships the same way for hundreds of years. The Harbinger represents a completely different approach to naval combat. The holographic display changed again to show technical specifications that would have been impossible to understand for anyone without advanced engineering training. Power output curves showed energy generation levels that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. Weapon systems were listed with capabilities that sounded more like science fiction than reality. The antimatter containment system alone is going to shock them, Nathan continued. We're generating power levels that they thought were theoretically impossible. And the armor isn't just strong, it's actually adaptive. It can reconfigure itself based on the type of attack it's facing. Jake nodded slowly as he absorbed the technical details. He had been involved in the project from the beginning, but the final specifications still impressed him. The Harbinger represented the best of human engineering and innovation, concentrated into a single vessel that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Patricia activated another display that showed intelligence reports about the alien fleet that was being assembled near Jupiter. They're bringing everything they have, she said. Over 200 ships from 30 different species. The Altarians are contributing their newest dreadnoughts. The Zenthari are sending their carrier groups. Even the usually neutral Balani are providing science vessels. They want to be absolutely certain they catch us in a violation. Lisa added, reading from her datapad. Senator Vexitar has been making speeches about how this will finally prove that humans can't be trusted. He thinks he's going to end human participation in galactic politics. Jake smiled grimly as he considered the senator's expectations. Vexitar has been underestimating humanity since the day we joined the Alliance. He sees us as primitive newcomers who got lucky in a few border skirmishes. He has no idea what we're actually capable of. The briefing room fell silent as everyone considered what was about to happen. In 7 days, the largest inspection fleet in galactic history would arrive at Jupiter expecting to find evidence of human treaty violations. Instead, they would encounter something that would force them to completely reconsider their assumptions about human capabilities. Nathan pulled up another display showing the crew roster for the Harbinger. Captain Murphy has been working with his senior staff to plan the demonstration. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster will handle the tactical systems during the reveal. Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez has been fine-tuning the power systems to make sure we get maximum visual impact. What about security? Patricia asked. We're going to have alien sensors pointed at our most advanced ship. The risk of technological compromise is significant. Jake had been thinking about this problem since he left the Senate chamber. The Harbinger's defensive systems include sensor scramblers that can prevent detailed scans. We'll show them enough to make our point, but not enough for them to reverse engineer our technology. Lisa looked up from her datapad again. Admiral, I'm getting reports that some of the alien governments are already positioning military assets near their borders. They're worried about how their neighbors might react to whatever we're about to show them. Good, Jake said. A little nervousness will make them more receptive to negotiation. After they see what we've built, they'll realize that cooperation is much more attractive than confrontation. Nathan adjusted his glasses again and looked directly at Jake. Are you absolutely certain about this course of action? Once we reveal the Harbinger, there's no going back. The entire political structure of the galaxy is going to change overnight. Jake looked around the room at the faces of his colleagues. These people had worked for years to make this moment possible. They had kept the secret maintained, the cover stories, and solved countless technical problems, all so that humanity could take its rightful place as an equal partner in galactic civilization. "I'm certain," he said finally. "It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you underestimate. The human spirit Captain Murphy has been waiting long enough to show off his ship. Let's give the aliens something they'll never forget." The space around Jupiter looked like a military parade ground, as ships from dozens of different species arranged themselves in precise formations. Senator Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship Retribution, watching the displays that showed the massive alien fleet he had assembled. The Altarian Dreadnought was one of the largest ships in the galaxy, but even it looked small compared to the vast armada that stretched out in all directions. Ambassador Krenal coordinated the sensor arrays from her science vessel Quantum Observer. The Zenthari had brought their most advanced scanning equipment, and every other species had contributed their best detection systems. The combined sensor power of the fleet could have mapped every asteroid in the solar system down to the smallest pebble. "Status report," Vextar demanded from his tactical officer. The young Altarian's scales were a lighter green than his commander's, and he moved nervously as he checked his instruments. "All vessels report ready for inspection duties, Senator." The officer replied, "We have complete sensor coverage of the area, and all communication channels are being monitored. The humans will not be able to hide anything from us." Vextar's yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the tactical display. This was the moment he had been working toward for years. The chance to expose human duplicity once and for all and reduce their influence in galactic politics to nothing. He had convinced 30 different governments to contribute ships to this effort, and the political pressure would be enormous. On the Quantum Observer, Krenal clicked her mandibles as she reviewed the sensor readings. Her compound eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously, and she was confident that nothing could escape their detection. The Zenthari had spent centuries perfecting their surveillance technology, and today they would use it to uncover humanity's secrets. "Incoming transmission," announced her communications officer. "The human fleet is approaching on schedule." Krenal turned her attention to the main display as 8 human ships dropped out of hyperspace near Jupiter's orbit. She counted them quickly: 1 carrier, 6 destroyers, and 2 cruisers. A respectable force by human standards, but laughably small compared to the armada that waited for them. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, clear and professional. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran. Defense Force reporting as requested for inspection. We are ready to comply with all Senate requirements." Vextar activated his own communicator, his voice dripping with contempt. "Admiral Morrison, your fleet is somewhat smaller than we expected. Are you perhaps hiding your other vessels somewhere?" "All active military vessels are present and accounted for," Senator Morrison replied. "We understood that you wanted to inspect our entire fleet, and that is what we have brought." The alien commanders began to communicate among themselves using their various forms of technology. The Balani sent rapid chirping sounds over encrypted channels, while the Keth used low-frequency growls that carried for light years. The smaller species relied on quantum entanglement communicators that allowed instant contact across any distance. Captain Susan Wright commanded the human carrier Enterprise, and she maintained her calm professional demeanor even as dozens of alien vessels surrounded her small fleet. Her bridge crew worked efficiently at their stations, running system checks and monitoring the massive sensor sweeps that were probing every inch of their ships. The inspection began immediately with teams of alien specialists using every type of scanning technology known to galactic science. They examined the molecular structure of the hull plating, counted every weapon mount, and mapped the internal layout of each vessel down to the smallest storage compartment. Dr. Nathan Clark watched from the Enterprise's science lab as the alien scanners probed deeper and deeper into the human ships. Helen Costa, the xenobiologist, stood beside him, reading the electromagnetic signatures that indicated how thoroughly they were being examined. "They're being incredibly thorough," Nathan reported to Admiral Morrison over the internal communication system. "Every bolt and rivet is being cataloged. I've never seen scanning this detailed before." Hours passed as the inspection continued. The alien fleet grew increasingly frustrated as their scans revealed nothing beyond standard human military technology. The weapons were within treaty limits, The power systems were conventional, and the defensive capabilities were exactly what the humans had declared. In their previous reports, Lieutenant Danny Walsh monitored communications from his position on the Enterprise bridge, and he could hear the growing confusion in the alien transmissions. They had expected to find evidence of massive treaty violations, but instead they were finding a perfectly ordinary human fleet. Senator Vexitar paced his bridge as his officers reported their findings. "Nothing, Senator." His tactical officer said, "The human vessels are exactly what they claim to be. Their technology is impressive, but it's all within the approved parameters." "That's impossible," Vexitar hissed. "Our intelligence was certain they were building something. We have sensor records showing massive construction projects in this system. On the Quantum, Observer Creenel was having similar problems. Her most advanced scanners were finding nothing that violated the treaties. The humans had clearly been developing their technology, but everything they had built was technically legal under the agreements they had signed. Admiral Morrison stood calmly on his bridge watching the alien fleet through the main view screen. His officers worked quietly at their stations, and there was an air of expectation that seemed to fill the entire ship. Lisa Rodriguez stood beside him, still holding her datapad, but now she was smiling slightly. "Admiral," Danny Walsh announced, "we're receiving a coded transmission on the emergency frequency." Morrison nodded and activated his personal communicator. The message was brief and encoded in a cipher that only a few people in the human fleet would recognize. Captain Murphy reporting ready and awaiting orders. The inspection was beginning to wind down, as the alien commanders realized they weren't going to find what they were looking for. Some of them were already discussing how to salvage their political positions after this embarrassing failure to prove human wrongdoing. Senator Vexitar was about to declare the inspection complete when Admiral Morrison activated the fleet communication channel. His voice carried to every ship in the massive armada, both human and alien. "Respected members of the Senate," Morrison said, his tone formal, but with an undertone that made several alien commanders look more closely at their displays. "You have now completed your inspection of our active fleet and found it in full compliance with all treaty requirements." He paused and his slight smile became more pronounced. "However, you specifically requested to see all human, military assets, and I believe in being thorough in my compliance with Senate directives." Morrison's voice became stronger and more confident as he continued, "Captain Murphy, please decloak and join the formation." The space around Jupiter's fourth moon began to shimmer and bend as if reality itself was being twisted. The alien sensors went wild as they tried to process readings that made no sense according to their understanding of physics. Something massive was materializing out of what had appeared to be empty space. The USS Harbinger dropped its cloaking field and appeared like a ghost, becoming solid. The ship was enormous, dwarfing even the largest alien dreadnoughts. Its hull was dark and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect, it giving it an ominous presence against the starfield weapon ports that defied classification dotted its surface. An energy reading showed power generation that exceeded every theoretical maximum in the galactic database. The alien fleet recoiled like a living thing as the Harbinger materialized in their midst. Ships that had been holding steady formation suddenly scattered as their commanders tried to put distance between themselves and the massive human vessel. The dark hull of the warship seemed to drink in the light from Jupiter, making it appear like a hole in space itself. Surrounded by the bright gleam of alien metal, on the bridge of the Retribution, Senator Vexitar stared at his tactical displays, with his mouth hanging open. The readings made no sense according to everything he knew about starship design. The human vessel was showing power output levels that should have been impossible, and weapon signatures that his computers couldn't even classify. His tactical officer, Sith, was frantically trying to get coherent readings from the sensors, but the instruments seemed to be malfunctioning every time they focused on the Harbinger. "Senator," he stammered, "the energy signature is beyond our measurement capabilities. The power core appears to be some kind of matter-antimatter reaction, but the containment system is unlike anything in our databases." Vexitar's yellow eyes narrowed as he tried to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be possible. The humans were newcomers to galactic civilization, barely more advanced than primitives when they first made contact. How could they have developed technology that surpassed species who had been building starships for thousands of years? Ambassador Kreenal's voice crackled over the communication array, and for the first time since he had known her, Vextar could hear panic in the Zenthari diplomat's rapid clicking. "This is impossible," she transmitted. "Our intelligence networks showed no indication of construction on this scale. How long has this vessel existed? Where was it built?" The Quantum Observer's sensors were more advanced than those on the Altarian flagship, but even they couldn't penetrate the Harbinger's hull. The ship seemed to be surrounded by some kind of field that redirected scanning attempts back at the observers. The more they tried to examine it, the less information they received. Captain Ryan Murphy's voice came across the communication channels, calm and professional despite the chaos his appearance had caused. "USS Harbinger reporting for inspection. Admiral Morrison. All systems are operational and ready for demonstration as requested." The human captain sounded almost casual, as if materializing. A warship that defied known physics was just another routine operation. The alien commanders exchanged frantic communications as they tried to decide how to respond to this development. Dr. Nathan Clark couldn't hide his satisfaction as he watched. From the Enterprise's science lab, the alien fleet was in complete disarray, with ships moving erratically as their commanders tried to establish new formations that would keep them at what they hoped was a safe distance from the Harbinger Helen. Costa monitored the electromagnetic spectrum and reported a constant stream of transmissions between the alien vessels. "They're panicking," she said with obvious pleasure. "Half of them are calling their home governments for instructions, and the other half are trying to figure out if they should retreat." The Harbinger dwarfed every other ship in the fleet, including the massive Altarian dreadnoughts. Its length was nearly twice that of Senator Vextar's flagship, and its hull was studded with weapon ports and sensor arrays that followed no known design principles. The ship's dark surface seemed to shift and flow as if it were alive, and the energy readings it produced made the alien sensors overload repeatedly. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Admiral Morrison watched the alien fleet's reaction with grim satisfaction. Years of being treated as junior partners in the galactic community had led to this moment. The other species had assumed that humanity lacked the capability to surprise them, and now they were learning how wrong they had been. Captain Murphy transmitted again, his voice carrying clearly across all communication channels. "Admiral Morrison, the Harbinger is ready to begin defensive demonstrations on your order. All weapon systems are online and crew stands ready." The mention of weapons caused another wave of panic through the alien fleet. Several smaller vessels actually began moving toward the edge of the system, as if preparing to flee the larger. Warships held their positions, but their commanders were clearly nervous about what they might be about to witness. Senator Vextar finally found his voice and activated his communicator, his words coming out in a rush. Admiral Morrison explained the meaning of this. "Where did this vessel come from? How long has it been in service? What are its capabilities?" Morrison's reply was measured and diplomatic, but there was steel underneath his polite tone. "Senator, the USS Harbinger has been under construction for 10 years as part of humanity's defensive preparations. The vessel incorporates several technological breakthroughs that our engineers have developed within the framework of our existing treaties." "Impossible," Vexitar hissed. "No species could develop technology like this in secret. Our intelligence networks monitor all major construction projects in this sector." "Your intelligence networks monitor what we allow them to see," Morrison replied calmly. "The Harbinger was constructed at a facility that has been shielded from detection since the beginning of the project. We have been very careful to ensure that our defensive preparations remained confidential." The alien commanders began transmitting demands for technical specifications and construction details, but Morrison ignored most of their questions. Instead, he focused on the growing crowd of ships that were trying to get sensor readings on the Harbinger. "Captain Murphy," Morrison said, "please activate the defensive grid. I believe our guests would like to see a demonstration of our capabilities." The Harbinger's hull began to glow with a soft blue light that seemed to emanate from within the metal itself. Energy barriers flickered into existence around the massive vessel, creating a shimmering cocoon that deflected the alien sensor beams back toward their sources. The more powerful the scanning attempt, the more energy was reflected back at the scanning vessel. The Zenthari science ship Quantum Observer was forced to shut down its main sensor array when the reflected energy overloaded its systems. Other vessels experienced similar problems as their attempts to examine the Harbinger resulted in feedback that damaged their own equipment. Ambassador Krenal's voice carried a note of desperation as she transmitted to the fleet. The defensive systems are unlike anything we have encountered. They appear to be using the energy from our own sensors against us. This should not be possible according to known physics. Dr. Clark monitored the alien communications and reported to Admiral Morrison. They're trying to coordinate a more detailed scan using the combined sensor arrays of the entire fleet, but every attempt just results in more feedback. The Harbinger's defenses are adapting to their scanning frequencies in real time. The demonstration continued for several minutes as the alien fleet tried every type of sensor and scanning technique in their arsenal. Nothing could penetrate the Harbinger's defenses, and several ships were forced to retreat when their systems began to overload from the reflected energy. Captain Murphy's crew performed flawlessly as they showed off the ship's capabilities without revealing too much about how the systems actually worked. The Harbinger moved through a series of maneuvers that demonstrated speed and agility that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster coordinated the tactical display from her position on the Harbinger's bridge, while Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez monitored the power systems that were providing energy for the demonstration. The crew had trained for this moment for years, and their professionalism was evident in every action. The alien fleet finally stopped trying to scan the Harbinger when it became clear that their efforts were not only futile but potentially dangerous. Several ships had suffered system damage from the reflected energy, and their commanders were reluctant to risk further equipment failures. Admiral Morrison allowed the silence to stretch for several long moments before speaking again. Respected senators and ambassadors, I trust this demonstration has answered your questions about humanity's military capabilities. The USS Harbinger represents our commitment to defending ourselves and our allies in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Senate convened within hours of the fleet's return to the capital. The great chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from every member species filled their seats while emergency broadcasts carried the proceedings to billions of viewers across the galaxy. The revelation of the Harbinger had sent shockwaves through every government and military command. High Chancellor Durack called the session to order, with his massive voice booming across the chamber. But even he seemed smaller somehow in the wake of what they had all witnessed. The Gorlan leader's stone-like features showed uncertainty for the first time in years, as he struggled to understand the implications of humanity's technological breakthrough. Senator Vexitar rose from his seat, but his earlier arrogance had been replaced by barely controlled fear. His green scales had taken on a sickly pale color, and his yellow eyes darted nervously around the chamber, as if looking for support. That was no longer there. Fellow senators, he began, we have witnessed a clear violation of the treaties that govern our alliance. But his words carried little conviction, and several other delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The evidence they had all seen made it clear that humanity had not violated the letter of any agreement, even if they had certainly violated the spirit of what the other species had expected. Admiral Morrison entered the chamber with Lisa Rodriguez at his side, followed by Dr. Nathan Clark and General Patricia Hayes, who had traveled from Earth for this historic session. The human delegation walked calmly to their seats, while hundreds of alien eyes tracked their every movement. Ambassador Krenal clicked, her mandibles in a pattern that indicated deep thought, rather than the aggressive posturing she had shown before Admiral Morrison. She said, "We require a full explanation of how this vessel was constructed and what technologies it incorporates. The implications for galactic security are enormous." Morrison stood and walked to the central podium where just days before he had faced accusations of treaty violations. Now the chamber was silent as every delegate waited to hear how humanity would explain their technological breakthrough. Respected members of the Senate, Morrison began, I understand your concern about the capabilities demonstrated by the USS Harbinger, but I want to assure you that every component and system on that vessel was developed in strict compliance with our existing agreements. Dr. Clark stepped forward carrying a data slate, loaded with technical specifications and legal documentation. The antimatter containment system uses principles that were approved for our civilian power generation program, he explained. The hull material is an advanced composite that evolved from materials cleared for our merchant marine. The defensive systems are applications of technology that you approved for our planetary defense networks. A murmur ran through the chamber as the implications became clear. The humans had not broken any rules. They had simply been more creative in interpreting those rules than anyone had thought possible. The Balani delegate ruffled his feathers nervously as he spoke. But Admiral Morrison, the psychological impact of such a vessel cannot be ignored. The balance of power in this region has been stable for centuries. Your ship changes everything. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. I understand your concerns, Ambassador. But I would remind this body that humanity did not seek to upset any balance. We simply responded to the reality that we were being treated as junior partners in our own defense. General Hayes activated a holographic display that showed intelligence reports from the past decade. This body has spent years questioning humanity's military contributions, she said. Several species have suggested that humans were somehow inadequate to defend themselves or their allies. The Harbinger demonstrates that such assumptions were incorrect. Senator Vextar made one last attempt to salvage his position. Admiral Morrison, your species has clearly been planning this deception for years. How can we trust partners who hide such significant developments from their allies? But his words fell flat in the changed atmosphere of the chamber. Too many delegates had seen the technical demonstrations and understood that humanity had operated within the bounds of their agreements even if they had exceeded everyone's expectations. High Chancellor Durack leaned forward in his throne, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. Admiral Morrison, what are humanity's intentions regarding this vessel and any others like it? Are we to expect a fleet of such ships? Morrison's answer was carefully measured. Your Honor, the Harbinger was constructed as a defensive measure, nothing more. Humanity has no aggressive intentions toward any member of this alliance, but we also have no intention of accepting limitations that others might try to impose on our sovereign right to defend ourselves. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the implications of this statement. The old assumptions about human capabilities were clearly obsolete, and new political calculations would have to be made. Ambassador Kreenel spoke again, her clicking now showing resignation rather than hostility. Admiral Morrison, we must ask what role humanity expects to play in alliance defense planning given these new capabilities. We expect to be treated as equal partners. Morrison replied, not as junior members who need supervision, but as allies who bring unique capabilities to our common defense. Dr. Clark added, technical details that emphasized how human innovation had solved problems that other species had considered impossible. The Harbinger represents a different approach to naval architecture, he said. Instead of building bigger versions of existing designs, we started from basic principles and asked what a warship should actually do. Captain Murphy's voice came over the communication system from his position near Jupiter, where the Harbinger continued its patrol duties. Admiral Morrison requesting permission to begin standard patrol operations along the Keth border. We have a lot of lost time to make up for. The mention of patrol duties sent another ripple through the chamber as delegates realized that humanity now possessed the capability to project military power across vast distances. The old calculations about regional balance were becoming meaningless. General Hayes provided context about the strategic situation. The Keth Empire has been probing our border defenses for months, while this body debated our treaty compliance. Having the Harbinger on patrol will provide a stabilizing presence in that region. High Chancellor Durack consulted with his advisors for several minutes before announcing the Chamber's decision. This body recognizes that humanity has operated within the legal framework of our existing treaties, he said. Therefore, we propose the following adjustments to alliance defense arrangements. The vote that followed changed the structure of galactic politics in ways that would be felt for generations. Humanity's military development programs were reclassified from monitored to autonomous, giving them the same freedom that other major powers enjoyed. Human representatives were invited to join the Defense Planning Committee as full partners rather than observers. Senator Vextar cast his vote with obvious reluctance, but even he could see that opposition was futile. The demonstration had made it clear that humanity was no longer the junior partner that could be dismissed or ignored. As the session concluded, Captain Murphy transmitted another message from the Harbinger. Admiral, all systems remain green, and crew morale is excellent. We're ready to show the galaxy that human determination and ingenuity are not to be underestimated. Morrison smiled as he approved the patrol mission. The age of humanity as the galaxy's junior partner was over, and the age of humanity as an equal power had begun. The other species would have to adjust to this new reality just as humans had once adjusted to joining a galaxy full of older civilizations. The Harbinger would patrol the borders and protect human interests, but more importantly, it would serve as a reminder that innovation and determination could overcome any limitation that others might try to impose. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their refusal to accept the boundaries that others defined for them.